everyone, and welcome to a video on accommodation of the lens in humans. We're going to see how our lens, the structure that we use to see, how it functions and helps us to see things clearly. So what we want to do is begin to look at first some of the basics of optics. And what we're going to do is with anything, we're going to begin our optics with a lens. And a lens is something that we're going to be using to see. And then with lenses, there's always a point that we have called a focal point where all light gets focused. Now, what we need to understand is that we have an object that we want to see here. Let's draw a pretty little tree for that example. And on this tree, if I'm wanting to view this tree, light from this tree is passing through my lens and it is getting bent. And when that light is bent, we say that it is refracted. And when the light refracts as it passes through any medium, light is bent. And when it is bent as it passes through the lens, there's an area in which the rays will converge called a focal point. The light is focused. If the light here is striking the most sensitive part of our eye, called the fovea centralis, which is in the macula lutea of the retina, then it will be a focused, clear image. If it's not, then it's fuzzy. So this is a few other things that we need to make sure we see is if I've got this focal point here, in the middle of my lens, I've got a distance between these two. And this is called a focal distance. And this will become very important as we go to understand the physiology of the lens itself. So let's take a look at that. So what we're going to do, we're just going to draw a curve at the back here representing our retina, and I'm going to draw a black dot here representing our fovea centralis. That is our desired focal point. Then in black, we're going to draw a lens here, and the lens will be drawn in black at a certain color because I'm going to add other colors to it. And then let's take an individual we're wanting to take a look at here. We're wanting to look at this person right here. And if we take a look at them, we're going to move them forward closer and far away. So what we have to see, again, is that every lens has a unique, a unique property called the focal distance. And I'm going to abbreviate now with an FD. That is always there. All lenses have that. We have this focal distance we're working with that we want to go on that black dot. We want it to go on the fovea centralis. Now, there are two factors that will affect this focal distance. And that is how far away something is from the lens, or the distance from the lens, and the shape of the lens, its thickness. So let's start off with the distance of an object from the lens. So let's say this individual that we're trying to look at starts to approach us and gets really close up to us. And they're now approaching us. They're getting closer. When the light passes through the lens and is bent, an object that is close to the lens, we have an increase in that focal distance. So closer objects have a greater focal distance. So the focal distance has been increased, and this will become very important as we go to try to understand the physiology. Now, if they move away from us, an object who's farther away has a shorter focal distance. So the focal point now has been reduced here. And now we have a shorter focal distance. Now, as we said, how do we fix this? Well, it's important to note that the shape of the lens compensates for the distance an object is from that lens. It can get thicker or it can get thinner. Now, let's start off with this near object. We got something that is nearby. It's very near. This object, this person is near. The lens, the thicker the lens, the more it bends the light. The lens will get thicker or rounder. A rounder lens has more refraction, and given that, a shorter focal distance. So it will move the focal distance onto the fovea, making it in focus. Very important. Now we got this object who's far off, this far off object. Well, we got another problem. A thinner lens has a longer focal distance. Well, the focal distance is too short for the far off object. So the lens will then get thinner, and as the lens gets thinner, this will increase the focal distance, and focus that object. So if we understand this basic process behind optics, this is how the eyeball works. And that's what's going to happen in accommodation. So with accommodation, what we're going to look at is some accommodation and get an idea of what accommodation is. So accommodation is just changing the lens to compensate for the focal distance, changing the lens thickness, right? So we're going to adjust the lens and its thickness to give us a clear image. Now what happens is you got two things that are happening during a basic accommodation. When something is nearby me, my lens gets thicker. When something is far off, the lens gets thinner. So let's look at accommodation and some of the issues going on with accommodation. And one of these is going to be the word that we were referring to is Myopia. Myopia, what we say is normal vision, right? Normal vision. This is your good vision. Our lens here, guys, is normally when you have your ciliary muscles are relaxed, the lens is relatively thin. And that is going to focus things on the retina so I can see far off things focused but not nearby things. So when I'm normally in my vision and hearing in normal vision, you have a fairly relatively thin lens, not too thin, not too thick to give us normal vision so I can see things far off in clear ways. And that will be in focus there. It doesn't bend it too much. And if you have that, we would be referring to your vision being 20/20. I can see at 20 feet what other people can see, normal people can see at 20 feet. Versus I can see at 10 feet what people can see at 20 feet, or they can be at 30 feet and I still need to be at 20 feet, etc. This is what we're talking about with vision. So in Myopia, normal vision, you can see far off objects properly focused, and then your eye will accommodate for that as it goes in. But problems with accommodation can occur very quickly. One of which just happens in two ways, is called myopia. And one is myopia is, we often call this nearsighted. And why we call this nearsighted is near objects, they are clear, but far objects are blurry. You cannot see things far off. You can see things near fairly clear. Well, there are two major causes of this. Either the eyeball is just way too deep, and if the eyeball is too deep, your lens is focusing and it's missing the mark. Or the lens at rest is entirely has a resting thickness. It's too great. The lens is too fat. And it's bending it too early and not allowing it to hit the fovea. And it's not in, so either we have a too deep of an eyeball, or a lens that is too thick at rest. It bends the light too much, because a thick lens, guys, does reduce that focal distance. And so we've reduced it too much. And what we have to do is correct this. And let me show you how we would correct myopia. So let's say here we have our light from our object here is coming through. Normally what is happening is it's being bent way too much here, and it's focusing. So if we were to go get a lens, some glasses, and we got glasses, the lens on our glasses were a very special case of lenses referred to as diverging lenses. What this will do is, now I'm going to take red, and this will be the light going through our diverging lenses. Diverging lenses, when the light hits it, it spreads it a little bit, and then the lens bends it. Light gets spread and then bent by the lens, and now it will hit here. It will be spread out, diverged, and spread by the lens a little bit, so when it hits our extra thick lens here in our eyeball, we will change it. So this is what we would do. So just remember, guys, for myopia, you need a diverging lens. You might want to become an MD, okay? Well, another issue can come about, similar in problem, that is referred to as hyperopia, which we call farsighted. Now, farsighted. Why farsighted? Well, far off objects equals clear. They are clear. But near objects, they are very blurry and we can't see them. We can see nearby things, but we can't see far off things. We can see far off things, we can't see near things. I'm sorry. What happens is there are two major causes. Either your eyeball is too shallow and you're shooting your focal point too far because the eyeball is too shallow. We wanted it here, but we overshot it. Or our lens is at a too thin of a state and not bending the light enough. And if it's not bending the light enough, it will also overshoot. So it's either too thin or it's too shallow and we're overshooting. So how will we correct that? Let's take a look at that. It requires another special kind of lens that you might want to go out and buy. So if we take our light coming through and it hits this thin lens, it doesn't bend it very much. And since it bends it so little, it's overshooting it. So we go out and we get lenses, and this lens is called a converging lens. And a converging lens, I know I got that a little bit too thick, but a converging lens is going to take the light rays and bend it so when the thinner lens takes this normal light and bends it not so much, it bends it more for me and it corrects my vision, and now I've adjusted my focal length. And this is how we would correct these things if we had image issues. So if we understand the overall functions and idea here that two things affect your focal distance, distance an object is from the lens, and the thickness of the lens or shape of the lens. The rounder the lens, the more it bends. So a round lens has a far larger or longer focal distance, and our objects nearby increase the focal distance, and the round lens bends it and then decreases the focal distance. Rounding the lens, the shorter the focal distance. The far off objects have a very short focal distance. We thin the lens to lengthen the focal distance. And given that, we now see. So I really hope this helps you guys understand what is going on there. If you have any comments, recommendations, please don't hesitate. Thank you so much for the support that you've all given me. Please send me some ideas you would like to see videos on. And this concludes my video. Thank you guys so much.